Welcome back, everybody, to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I am your host, Solaris BlueRaven. Wow, it sounds like a spaceship in the background. That's cool. And my special guest tonight is, I wish, no, it's Jason Jarrell. Jason, did you hear that? Was it you in the background?
No, I didn't hear it, but I mean,
Oh, it was.
I just
Okay.
hope they know I'm armed.
All right. Well, I'm actually was hoping it was my, black triangle, but, it sounded like a nice, cool spaceship. I don't know if anybody caught that, but I could hear it. Anyways, welcome back. And once again, we have wonderful questions in the chat. Everybody in the chat's been asking a lot of cool questions. And they did ask also, do the descendants of the tall ones, how tall would they be? I kind of worded that wrong, but any ideas?
Well, going by the records of the Smithsonian agents and 20th century archaeologists who were willing to go on record with these discoveries, such as Martin and Randall's, Robert Silverberg, William S. Webb, and Don Dragoo, and many others who we cite in our book, the large skeletons were usually somewhere between 7 and 8 feet tall.
Okay.
Now, when you consider that only 1 in every 146,000 Americans reaches 7 feet in height, that's pretty remarkable for a culture that was concentrated in 4 or 5 U.S. states and spanned just over 1,000 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very interesting. And I always factor in, I try to factor in atmospheric conditions, environment, insofar as oxygen content and everything else. When I look back on the timelines insofar as how people were taller at that point in the continuum, I don't know if you ever noticed anything like that or not.
Well, the remarkable thing about if we only, the book describes 4 major ancient cultures that the tall ones were a part of. But if we just zero in on one of them, the Adena culture, that's only just over 2,000 years ago. So when we look at the mainstream interpretation of the development of humankind, and we see these sort of charts where, the Neanderthal just exits stage left, enter Cro-Magnon, and it's as if one form of mankind just conveniently stops appearing and then the newest model takes over. Well, considering how recent many of these large remains are in the archaeological record, I think that creates a real problem for this theory of sequential origins and development of humankind. It's more like the types of things we see in the works of J.R. Tolkien, where there are many types of beings and humanoids who lived contemporaneously with one another. Of course, I'm not saying that Lord of the Rings is the reality of this situation. I'm just drawing an analogy there.
Right.
But yes, this definitely would suggest that different types of humans may have coexisted rather than simply came in and replaced one another, with people happily going extinct at the right time.
Yeah, it makes some sense right there. It's interesting. When you look and see how much has been modified or changed on this illusion of a world we exist on, I have to say, to me, it seems like we've been engineered, and I know that this is way out there. This isn't really on track insofar as what the research you've been doing, but I look at it insofar as an engineered species that no matter what we do or who we are in this timeline, there's always been something going on where we've been engineered to some degree, and even our environment. So I do factor that in, even though it's not here in visible, it's hidden in plain sight, but definitely something to look at.
Well, the fact is that I think that today most truly open-minded and informed people either hold a perspective like yours or they hold perspectives similar to mine. At the end of the day, what we have in common is we see true holes in the mainstream interpretation of human origins.
Very true.
And it's very important that open-minded people continually support one another and allow one another to keep their own perspectives, because at the end of the day, that's the only way that knowledge can truly progress. One thing that I would say to the audience is the modern dogmas of modern science oftentimes cannot hold up to even the slightest scrutiny. And this goes for a discovery known as Piltdown Man, which really, Piltdown Man was the reason that evolution went from being considered an absurd theory to a scientific fact. Piltdown Man was a skeleton supposedly discovered at Sussex between 1911 and 1915, and this was thought to be the missing link between ape and mankind. And at this point, the textbooks in the major universities began to teach that evolution had been proven, that it was now a fact. But unfortunately for the theory of evolution, 40 years after its discovery, an Oxford anatomist found that the bones of Piltdown Man were fraudulent and the entire discovery was a hoax. The scientific establishment lamented the possibility of having to revise thousands of textbooks and retracting their theories, so it just didn't happen. They never did retract the position that evolution was more of a fact than a theory.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
If you believe in the scientists of today as an infallible source of knowledge, and you doubt their capacity for deception, I encourage you to investigate the issue of Piltdown Man, because it brings to question what else we are being lied to about.
Mm-hmm. Which is just about everything, as we've touched on before.
Exactly, and that is why I strongly support work like yours, and I strongly support the work of other people who write about the same subjects I do, but who I disagree with, because at the end of the day, what we're all doing is very important, because the establishment itself needs to be questioned now more than ever.
Mm-hmm. Right.
At the Oracle of Delphi in ancient Greece, the priests they used an intoxicated teenager and her ramblings. They would either drug her or have her to inhale a noxious gas, and her ramblings were then supposedly only able to be interpreted by the priests. Mm-hmm. And the interpretation was seen as the word of the gods.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's still going on today, by the way, in different formulas.
Mm-hmm. And
go ahead.
The oracle became the most powerful authority in the ancient world. But what we now know through investigations that have happened in recent times is that the priests translated the gibberish of the oracle however they wanted. Mm-hmm. And they actually had an intelligence network of spies throughout the Greek lands. And so they used this oracle in order to manipulate affairs in the direction that they willed. I submit that many scientists today are the modern priests of Delphi, mm-hmm. and the oracle is science itself. Through manipulating what the oracle known as science says, the priesthood is able to convince millions of people that they have no purpose, that they evolved from slime, and that there are too many humans living on this planet. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, the goal of the new priesthood is to convince us that we are meaningless, powerless, and born into a world where there is no higher authority than the state.
Mm-hmm. Well said, Jason. When you speak, I've said this before, I know you're just an old soul. You're so ancient. I can tell by the way you interpolate data. So once again, that's very deep what you just said. I hope everybody absorbs that because it's spot on. Thank you.
Well, it's just an observation in light of human history. We can all have these insights if we would just read and study ourselves. Mm-hmm. There's a rich heritage of history that we as human beings, it's really our responsibility to understand it and what it means and how it applies to the modern world.
Right. Yeah. And thinking is very, very important instead of delegating your power to whatever technology is out there. And like I said, I love technology. It's not the artificial intelligence that's the problem. It's man's programming of the artificial intelligence.
Humans You are exactly right. You are.
Mm-hmm.
That is exactly right. The technological age is not itself the problem. The internet itself is not the problem. The issue that we face are immoral humans who are trying to drive us in a particular direction.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a result of what I like to call the age of the licensed expert. It's a license for a reason. There's a great unspoken requirement today in the universities. You could call it an unspoken mandate in demoralization. Our wealthiest and most influential minds are taught that there is no moral authority higher than the laws of men or corporate objectives. They are taught that all life emerged from a pointless, aimless primordial stew, and that all of the existence is meaningless, except for the indulgence of desire and the accumulation of material wealth. And if there is a moral code which can be gleaned from the universities, it is this: the state must grow in power and the individual must diminish. And we educated few, we licensed few, must prosper at the expense of all others. So it shouldn't surprise us when our most educated minds devote themselves to developing hostile AI tech, GMO foods, weapons of war, and go to work for corporate entities that seek to enslave and destroy the human race. Because ultimately, they're coming from an environment where any type of moral compass has been sort of ironed out of them.
Mm-hmm. Truly. Yeah, I agree with that. Everything's weaponized at this point in the continuum. And it will be interesting to see what kind of construct, rises above the ashes, so to speak. It seems to me like the false matrix it's collapsing. There's no doubt about that. But these guys are still running rampant. And once they control the hive, the collective of brainwave activity, they control reality, as we all know. So, yeah, it gets pretty deep. It gets pretty wild. But you make some very good points here tonight. Excellent points.
Well, the only thing that's necessary for us to prevail at this point, because the construct is collapsing, the only thing that's necessary for us to prevail is to tell the truth. And this goes for anyone listening to this. Understand that it is your mission, it is your cause to hold these people accountable and to call them for what they are. It is my opinion that anyone working in the fields of warfare, transhumanist technologies, hostile AI technologies, anyone working in these fields today are as guilty of crimes against the humanity as the Nazis were at the Nuremberg trials.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course that morphed in from Project Paperclip and other areas. It's just never stopped. The whole thing has been global and insidious. There's no doubt. But I agree with you, and that's why I say, with that type of access to that type of technology and information, you have to have certain ethics. And I would say beyond a moral compass, a universal compass. And it certainly isn't happening here. We need to step it up. I always say step up to the galactic neighborhood. And that means step up in consciousness, not just sit here and become stupefied by all the programming.
I couldn't agree more, Solaris. You hit the nail right on the head.
It's just like, well, we should have our own think tank. I'll tell you what, Jason, you need to be in charge of something because you're brilliant. And I've always said that about you. I don't just say that. I mean it. And that's why I love having you on my show, because you're very deep and you talk on a very advanced scale in consciousness. I hope everybody appreciates this data. Sometimes people just zone out and watch stupid things on television. I hope they start tuning in on Saturday nights and start listening to wonderful beings like you, because it's really important. So, that.
Well, the wonderful thing about this show is that this audience doesn't require us to pull any punches.
That's right. Oh, no. It's lock and load on my show.
This crew knows the score, and they know where this ship's heading, so we can talk about the deeper things.
That's what I like. Yeah, and that's really important too. I mean, I like the work that you're doing. I just love it. And then also we can go into other depths of what's really happening also on different parallels, which is very significant because it's really what you've uncovered. Unfortunately, we should have been able to access this data years ago, decades ago, and unfortunately, it's been covered up and obfuscated to some degree. And it took someone like you and Sarah to actually get in there and start rolling up your sleeves, and you found so much data.
Well, that was really the objective. I actually spent a considerable amount of treasure assembling the reports that we used to write this book. More money really was spent creating this book than anyone could possibly make off of it. And that's fine, because the creation of the book was a service. It was a service to interested individuals who wanted the reality behind this mystery. And if there's a reality behind this mystery, it means that there could be something waiting behind anything. And if you're the type of person who is fascinated by some subject, whether it's ancient or modern, really doesn't matter, you should get into the field, roll up your sleeves, and start doing research yourself. And because, take my word for it, even if there are 300 books already written on the same subject, chances are there's a lot that people have not uncovered.
So true.
I think there are around 300 or 400 scientific references in Ages of the Giants, and we quoted them and put them there so that the book could serve as a study guide or an archive, where these reports are all assembled together in one place.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's what I love about it. Yeah, it's definitely a nice resource manual. I call it a resource manual to some degree. I mean, if anybody's in college or studying, this is a perfect book for education.
Well, it was largely written using college textbooks. Several of the books that I studied initially for this project are between 900 and 1,000 pages. I basically spent 4 years giving myself a crash course in archaeology from around the world, actually. I've studied it back to the Upper Paleolithic in the ancient East, Europe, and America. I have 8 chapters of a book that I'm working on about the tall ones in other parts of the world, waiting to be finished also. So that should be coming in the future at some point.
Well, it's going to be fantastic. Does that connect to the Egyptian civilizations?
Yes, it will. A lot of people are unaware of some of the discoveries that were made regarding Egyptian civilization in the 1800s, actually. What you need to understand, what everyone needs to understand right now, is if you're going to study ancient history, go into it with this knowledge, because this is one of the most important lessons I learned. After World War II, archaeologists around the world decided to throw out everything they knew about ancient history and rewrite the textbooks. And the reason they did so was they wanted to remove the factor of human beings from ancient history. They replaced history with what is known as pots, not people. In other words, cultures spread around the world by accident. The pottery and the artifacts and other entrapments of culture spread without actual people conquering one another or colonizing parts of the world. And the reason they did this was they became terrified of the concept of race. The Nazis had left a terrible taste in the mouth of anthropologists because the Nazis themselves had employed so many archaeologists in their own projects. And so there was this effort to edit history and replace what was known at the time. And a lot of that information has to do with the true origins of the ancient Egyptian civilization, because it was becoming fairly clear by the 1940s that the true origins of the Egyptian civilization were in the possibility that the area had been colonized in the ancient past by a people who came from outside of the region. And that was very controversial to the more politically correct archaeologists of the mid-20th century, and so it was expunged from the record.
Very interesting. And of course, you're going to cover a lot of this in your next book series. I say you're going to be busy writing. I can tell you that much. I'm looking forward to hear more about this. It's fascinating. And, and I look and see all of the antiquities over there, with ancient Egypt and everything. It seems to me like they've just gutted that whole complex, the Giza complex, and of course sold whatever to the highest bidder insofar as ancient artifacts go. That's just my perception.
Well, archaeology has always been big business.
Yeah, it certainly is, isn't it? It's very interesting. So we're wondering who's hoarding all these ancient artifacts across the globe.
Well, I can tell you that a few years ago, we did an investigation in a small town here in West Virginia where a college professor in 1929 had unearthed two large skeletons from an Adena mound. One was 7 feet 6 inches, the other was 9 feet. And we did an investigation in this town to see what we could learn about the archaeologist and his family history and other people who may have known something about the discovery. And what we found was the site where the skeletons had been found had been excavated again, and yet another large skeleton discovered and then sold on the black market to a wealthy elite family. So there's also a market for unusual skeletons that still exists.
It makes sense. Yeah, it's really sad. Yeah, God only knows what they do to them too, or what they've done with them. But it's just crazy. It really is.
Well, it is crazy. It's very macabre. When we wrote Ages of the Giants, we made the decision to include a postscript to the book that talks about the influence of eugenics and elite organizations on, the history of the discovery of these large bones. And what we found and document in the book is that in America, everyone from the Rosicrucians to the Freemasons to the Theosophical Society had this strange fascination with these large skeletons from American Indian mounds. In fact, what many people may be unaware of is that Helena Blavatsky, who was one of the most prominent theosophists of her day, her books, Isis Unveiled and The Secret Doctrine, which heavily influenced the doctrines of the Nazi Party, actually read like giantology books today. There are numerous lists of the discovery of gigantic skeletons from around the world in her books. But anyway, one of the most interesting and disgusting events that we found in the record involves the large remains found at Lovelock Cave in Nevada, which is a very famous discovery. People have talked about it on television and in numerous books over the years. We found that there was a mummified individual around 7 feet tall found in Lovelock Cave. And the body had been preserved so well that the investigators were able to pull on the muscles and cause the fingers to move on the arms. Now, in our investigation, we found two credible sources which stated that this body was stolen by a local fraternal lodge that boiled it in a stew to use in initiation ceremonies.
Jeez, it's amazing. Wow. Well, that tells you what they're up to, doesn't it? It's insidious, isn't it? I guess they're trying to absorb the energy of the powerful giant and the frequency, huh?
Well,
or they're just making a mockery of it.
Yeah. Many people are unaware that the vacation house of the Rockefeller family that was used as a location where the international cartel of industrialists and bankers met to found the Federal Reserve in the early 1900s. That house was built on Jekyll Island over top of the remains of several burial mounds of the Timucua Indians. And those burial mounds, as we'll be recording in our next book, yielded the remains of gigantic skeletons.
That's very interesting right there. Yeah, it seems to me like they've been obsessed with the world of the mysticism and the cult and all the other levels of those supernatural activities.
Yes, they're obsessed. At least we know that they were. It's difficult to say what they're obsessed with today, other than
I think it's
annihilation.
Right. No, I think that their obsession now is the new kid on the block is, in my opinion, is the artificial intelligence program. It's the array
Yes.
system, because that's how you can control and manipulate the mass collective. Plus, you can do erasures on them and basically manipulate brainwave activity to insert, dialogue narratives, or, they can do everything or anything to a target. So I think that's really where what they're after at this point in the continuum. And it's, it's deployed. It's been revealed to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
It's really,
well,
go ahead.
That's absolutely true. The educational, scientific, industrial complex in the United States has emerged as the greatest threat to life on Earth in the history of the world. And I realize that sounds like a loaded statement, but if you only have eyes to see, you can see that it's very, very true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In 1938, an individual named Vannevar Bush became the head of the Carnegie Institute. And being the head of the Carnegie Institute meant that Vannevar Bush was also the head of the international eugenics movement.
Mm-hmm.
It was Vannevar Bush who began guiding the policies of international eugenics to being a full-on war against the entire population. And this person was also a co-founder of a company called American Appliance in 1922, which eventually became Raytheon, the military defense contractor. He was also on the board of the National Committee for Aeronautics, which eventually became NASA, and he was also the architect of the Manhattan Project.
Well, there you go. Well, that just covers everything, doesn't it?
Precisely. So, studying our history, as a nation, it becomes pretty clear what's happened.
That's very interesting. Well, that's reeks of, the Fourth Reich to some degree as well. A lot of that information right there. All those correlations with aeronautics and NASA. And yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? And of course, they've never gone away, and everybody still glorifies all these people, and I don't care what people do with their lives, but when they're starting to control and manipulate the mass collective, and there's a game being played, and everybody's a pawn on the chessboard, I do have a problem with that. That's not how we're supposed to be living, So it is an issue, and I guess to the wise and the intelligent ones will keep ascending and move out and on and beyond all this illusion. But man, oh man, what a mess they've made through their own legacy and their own families.
Well, I think that the good news is people like David Rockefeller are dead. Unfortunately, we have moved into a new era of technocrat with people like George Soros and Jeff Bezos.
Mm-hmm.
These are the new faces of globalism and the technocracy. But even then, these are people who depend upon the population remaining at sleep. And the existence of shows like this one prove that they're failing in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as long as you can still think and you have the ability to talk and stand strong and be fearless insofar as communicating the truth, I think that we can still keep, navigating out of this illusion. But yeah, it's really a problem, isn't it? But yeah, that's one of the reasons I still do the show, I'm still here just putting it out there because I know there's so much deception. I can't stand it, quite honestly. If I were to take time off, which I did, and I really appreciate it. It was last month. I took a whole month off, and thank you, Mr. Rowe and Bill Grant, for filling in for me because it was great. I needed to take a break from the radio, but it's so it's so toxic. But then at the same time, you see all the crap, Jason, and it's just like after a while, I'm back over here doing what I need to do, and putting wonderful people on my show like you because it's very important that your voices are heard, and mine too. And anybody else out there. So,
well, doing what you need to do is actually the key to victory. And this goes for everyone. This goes for the audience, for all the people who are a part of our dialogue tonight. Understand that in ancient societies, the natural state of humankind is for specific individuals who are naturally inclined to fulfill specific roles. Each person is born for a reason. Each person has natural tendencies, natural abilities that are uniquely theirs, and those are given to them so that they can perform a specific role in human economy. What's happened is, like many ancient societies, we've seen these roles taken over by institutions. If we look at hunter-gatherer cultures and the way that they eventually devolve into elitist systems in the past, we see that what happens is that the roles of people like the healer, the shaman or priest, the role of the leader of the hunt, they're all assumed and institutionalized. They become status markers, and they become the domain of a sort of ruling institution. And that's what we see today with bureaucracies and with things like the medical industry, the Pentagon. These are institutions which have usurped roles which rightly belong to humankind and are now a part of an establishment process. So the way that we overcome that is to educate ourselves, to let entertainment decrease in our lives, and to explore who we are, to learn, to explore the subjects for which we are naturally inclined, and to begin to practice the roles which the Creator has naturally designed us to fill. It could be studying ancient history. It could be a renegade anthropology. It could be to craft science fiction which inspires people. But whatever it is, you'll find it within yourself, and you'll know it when you find it.
Exactly. And in my opinion, it takes on the formula of being multidimensional and multifaceted. It also, people work they work their entire lives. And in my opinion, if you're going to work, do something that you really enjoy doing. That's the bottom line. If you're going to do something out there, make sure that you're at least enjoying what you're doing. Otherwise, what's the point? And a lot of it is just enslavement anyway. And so far as just keeping people to the level of struggle, so they can't even focus on what they're really capable of doing on a creative scale. And that's such a disservice on so many levels.
Yes, you must fight and make time for yourself.
Right.
The corporate industrial complex is designed to keep you busy, busy, busy. You must resist. You're going to have to make sacrifices to do that. You're going to have to accept that there are some things that you can live without. You have to follow the path of the individual, and you have to reject a lot of things that the world keeps telling you desperately need. In fact, you do not need them. You need to know who you are, and we need you to know who you are, because each person's role is specifically there to benefit the whole. Carl Jung, the great depth psychologist, discovered the true self within humanity, within our consciousness. And this self, Jung believed, had specific roles programmed into it that were designed for us to perform in our outward life. And he believed that if the majority of people did this, if they discovered this true function within themselves, that humanity could reach a state of harmony. And I think that's true. I don't believe that whether nature, whatever your belief, nature, providence, God, I do not believe that God creates trash or malfunctioning junk. We are here for a reason, and I encourage everyone to look inward, to unplug yourselves at all costs from the sort of social entertainment matrix and find what that is.
Yeah, that's well said. Yeah, there's too much social engineering going on, and a lot of the platforms are obviously associated with the internet. And of course, you have to take everything with a grain of salt, what you see with the Facebook and all that garbage, and the selfies and everything else that people are doing. They need to be redirected, I guess is the word.
The selfie is one of the most horrible things ever conceived of, is it not?
Yeah, no, I agree. It reminds me of little, I always say it's like little parrots looking at themselves in the mirror or something. There's something wrong with that, I don't get it.
It's almost as bad as Nickelback, but I digress.
That's funny. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with some people in society. I really don't. And I'm observing, I'm just a neutral positive for the most part. I do address it, but yeah, it does need to change. And, you can only help people for so long, but I think that the right people are actually switched on, and we're here, so compensating for the illusion and delusion, shall we say. But yeah. Now, you're also working on ancient linguistics, right? I know you kind of touched on this, and I guess you alluded that to your future book, right?
Yes.
Ancient. Okay, can you want to elaborate on that just a little bit, or no?
Well, I'm studying linguistics because I am applying the history of languages to my research in Europe and here in North America. For one thing, one of the topics I'm studying is the origin of the Indo-European language and the spread of Indo-European people, because it's absolutely incredible what's being found right now regarding Indo-European origins. That's an entire conversation in and of itself, but it's turning the field of anthropology upside down as we speak. In terms of North America, the reason that I'm studying ancient and modern North American languages of the Native American people and their ancestors is, in many cases, we can use the history of a specific language to chart the territorial history and migrations of the people who speak it. And since Indians were on the move for thousands of years, this is a very valuable tool that enables us to determine which ancient Indians were part of which ancient cultures, depending on the location and the timing and the terminology, that the terms that existed for different plants and animals and rivers and locations in the language. And this is one of the tools that we're using right now to build our case to reveal the true identity of the mound builders here in the Ohio Valley.
That's fascinating. That's a science all on its own, isn't it?
Yes, and it's just one more discipline I've had to add to my repertoire to try to answer some of the outstanding mysteries of this subject. I'm also studying methods of perishable manufacture, genetic anthropology, several things now that we're adding to sort of the mounting evidence that we have to finally address this mystery.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Have you ever thought about, I know there's some strangeness going on with the Big Island over there in Hawaii, but have you ever thought about going over there and to the Hawaiian Islands and doing some research and excavating or doing anything over there pertaining to their history?
In Hawaii? Well, I mean, I'm sure I would enjoy it, but any one of these cultures, there are people that study any one of these cultures here in eastern North America their entire lives. And when this next book is finished, we will have spent a decade or more just on the greater Mississippi Valley and the Great Lakes region.
Wow.
But, yes, so after that, if there is another archaeological type of project, it will probably be in South America, because we recently found some very unexpected evidence of a tie between these cultures and cultures in South America. And it was unexpected because the source of the information is a long-dead archaeologist, but the same person had gone on record in other instances and denied any such connection. So we're probably going to follow up on that at some point. So
very interesting.
Yes, there's several things we'd like to do. I know that after the second Giants book, we're going to be tackling the medical industry and several other American institutions and what follows that. So we'll see what time provides.
Very good. And when you talk about tackling the medical industry itself, are you talking about putting a book out on homeopathic medicine, or?
Well, I'm talking about a project in which we are going to expose the roots and true origins of not just the medical industry, but several other things, including the MK Ultra project, the
Very
American
nice.
the American food industry, the chemical weapons that are used in our food. It's going to cover a broad range of subjects, and that's something that we're working on already, actually. So that's another one of our big passions, is to kind of expose the roots of the major pillars of our society, because if you look at the origins of many bureaucracies and agencies and corporations that exist today, they have blatantly evil sources. Mm-hmm. And by evil, I realize that different people have their own definition of evil. But if I say to you that an organization that receives a considerable amount of American tax dollars for its projects was actually created by Nazis, I assume that would fulfill any criteria for the term evil. Mm-hmm. So those are some more of the types of subjects that we plan to use the same historical investigation methods we used for the tall ones. We're going to apply that to the rise of this sort of technocracy in the United States.
Excellent. It's going to be fantastic. Yeah, we need more books like that out. There's no doubt about it. I'm very, very much looking forward to that. It's going to be exceptional beyond words and well needed at this point in the continuum. So, yeah, we just keep pounding down the walls, don't we? And, it's got to.
Well, it blows my mind, Solaris, to consider that I'm living in the year 2018, and there are still people who are unaware of things like Project Paperclip.
Mm-hmm. Right.
There are still people unaware of MK Ultra, and our intention is to simply use what is declassified, because that's enough.
Right. Yeah. And if you're like me, you have the experience with a lot of the technology. So no, it's for real. And it's really sad because a lot of that technology has been morphed into entertainment. It's been, put into movies and films and books, but never really addressed appropriately. So real disservice.
Yes.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. But yeah, the whole society and globally has been socially engineered to such a degree. It's unfortunate that that's been going on. I still think the universal repercussions are not very good for the people that have been doing this, though. The controllers and the programmers and the operators. I think that there's a big wave coming that's not necessarily in their favor. So something to look at.
Well, the wave is certainly on its way. I mean, we're living at present at the cusp of a second Great Awakening. Mm-hmm. I personally foresee that there's another renaissance on the horizon for mankind. It's just a matter of us getting there, crossing that bridge across the swamp or the river that lies between us and that dawn.
Right.
But yeah. I do believe we will get there. Many people don't realize today that the biblical scriptures represent one long chronicle of a powerful God who favors the cause of people who thirst for freedom. And although the religious institutions of our day have failed, I tend to think that God remains the same and still favors the cause of people who thirst for freedom. The only thing we have to do is remain true to ourselves and our principles.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. And actually, for those who don't know what their principles are, they need to wake up a little bit and smell the coffee. So there's no doubt about it. I know you talk about that also, in your book, you touch on the giants of the Vedas and also, the flood and the fall of Atlantis. I don't know if you want to touch on that a little bit.
Well, yes. The reason for touching on that in the book was we found that in the 1800s, there was a type of ancestral cult that emerged among French and English royalty and aristocrats. And their term for it was Aryanism. And what we know as eugenics or scientific racialism really was just the public form of the practical aspect of this religion. And the more we investigated this belief system, which was very popular among bankers, industrialists, and and other types of elites in the United States and Europe by the early 1900s, the more we researched it, we were continually surprised at some of the incredible claims of the people who followed this belief system. And I believe that what we actually had found is the actual religion of the Western elite class, at least at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And in the book, we quoted several of the leading proponents or architects of eugenics, including people like Arthur de Gobineau, Madison Grant, Houston Stewart Chamberlain, and many others. These are all people who are very well known and acknowledged historically as the architects of Western elitism and eugenics. But we quoted their own writings in the postscript to Ages of the Giants to show the readers, in their own words, that these people actually considered themselves to be the descendants of an ancient gigantic race that they called Aryans or Nordics. And not only did they consider themselves to be such, but they counted the ancient giants who lived in the land of Canaan in the Bible as their ancestors. Eventually, because of this, there was considerable animosity between these Westerners and the Jewish people. And that ended in devastating consequences during the Holocaust. So this twisted belief system really had a devastating impact on world history. And it was embraced by numerous people. Now, you mentioned Atlantis. It was Helena Blavatsky of the Theosophical Society who had made a connection herself between these ancient Aryans and Atlantis. She believed that these Aryans, the ancestors of the elite class, had originated from Atlantis, and that concept was eventually embraced by several mystical societies which were affiliated with the ideologies of the Third Reich also. So there's several finds there, sort of intellectual schools, if you will, that evolved out of this belief among European and American power brokers that they were descended from a superior race from the ancient past.
That's very interesting. It seems to me like there's an awful lot of wars, started from what we call a species war almost. That's what I call it, because of what we call celestial heritage or extraterrestrial heritage to some degree, when you think about it. But very, very interesting nonetheless. And yet they're still warring. I mean, it's the same old story, same old thing. Never it changes.
Well, many people, you mentioned war, isn't it interesting how no matter who we elect to office, the war must go on?
It's a moneymaker.
It's incredible. Even populist candidates who promise to end specific wars, after they get elected to office, they have consultations with this nebulous group they refer to as the generals. And then they come out and they tell us, I've changed my mind. We're going to stay in Afghanistan. It's absolutely amazing. The war must go on.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are probably unaware of the role that archaeology played in the Nazi war policy. The Nazis believed in this sort of Aryan super race heritage that I mentioned before, and when they wanted to invade a nation, as they did Poland, what they would do is they would say, well, our archaeologists found that our Aryan ancestors inhabited Poland. That means it's actually ours anyway, and then they would just invade the nation. For people who don't believe that archaeology can become a tool of politics, I highly recommend you look into how the Nazi Party used archaeology.
Yeah, that's well stated. Absolutely. Well, that can be explained on other areas also. You look once again going back to Egypt and the pyramids and a lot of the technology over there, and the information seems to have been taken and hidden away, and even in the UK and other areas. So it seems to me like they've pretty much decided who wants what and and what species and what legacy and what heritage and ancestry gets to take everything.
Exactly. You'll always be able to tell when evil rears its head, because universally throughout human history, it is always among the people who consider themselves somehow, whether it's spiritually or genetically, superior to everyone else. It's always among the people who consider themselves special, who consider themselves, for whatever reason, the rightful rulers of other people. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no such thing as the rightful ruler of any person. Every person is created for absolute freedom, and any ideology or belief system which suggests otherwise should be treated as an enemy.
I agree. I totally agree. And that's what we're dealing with right now on the timeline. It's just the enslavement aspect of literally just, sucking away everyone's freedoms and rights, whether it's here in this country. I mean, we are the last holding ground for freedom, if you ask me, insofar as, freedom of speech or anything else that's pertaining to expansion of consciousness. I mean, everyone else across the globe is getting completely censored and screwed over to some degree.
Well, they certainly are, and there are numerous cultures around the globe that are being overrun with migrants. I'm not sure how you can call armies of barbarians migrants, but it is destroying many people around the world today. It's really sad.
Yeah, that's the first wave of destruction. Right there, they're pawns on the chessboard. And I call them invaders. There's no doubt about it. And also biowarfare, because a lot of them haven't been vetted for disease or anything else. So, vetted, I can go on and on about that because I'm watching Europe go to black. I mean, literally, Europe has just gone to crap in the handbasket. And, UK, it's embarrassing what's going on. And I can't for the life of me figure out what the hell's wrong with these people and the illusion of power and control. But I do understand that that's an agenda. So.
Well, understand this. A person like George Soros knows no nation, knows no loyalty to any culture or nation.
Right.
So when these people have power over nation states, there's no way we can even expect them to understand what it means to have a personal culture or a flag or nationhood. Because ultimately they have nothing because they have everything.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, last thing I want to see is this country into like the third world status, and it seems like even though we have a superpower military and a lot of other things, we have to clean up what's going on here. Otherwise, it doesn't matter what kind of military we have; the whole country is going to go down into the sewer. So that's another show altogether, isn't it, Jason?
I suppose so.
Yeah. But I want to ask you, we're almost out of time here in the Illusion of. I have to thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's always a pleasure to have you on. And once again, let everybody know how to contact you and also purchase your book.
Well, you can friend me on Facebook, or
Excellent.
You can go to our website, paradigmcollision.com, where you can read tons of free articles and blog posts on the subject of the ancient giants and more. There are a lot of resources on the site that can help you do your own research, and you can contact us through the site if you have any questions. We'll be happy to help you to sort of enter this field if you have not done so yet. And you can purchase our book, Ages of the Giants, A Cultural History of the Tall Ones in Prehistoric America, on lulu.com. That's LULU.com.
Perfect. Excellent. And what about public presentations or new books? And I know you talked about the new books, but what about public presentations? Anything going on?
There could be something near the end of the year,
okay.
But the details are still pretty sketchy. So.
Okay. All right. Well, we're out of time here, and I want to thank you again, Jason, for joining us. Thank you to everybody in chat for the great questions. Everybody have a wonderful weekend, and stay tuned for Shiny Side Out with David Dunger and Becky coming up next to sell you on to the night from Down Under with their fantastic show as they always do. All right, everybody, have a wonderful weekend, and thank you again, Jason. It's been a wonderful show.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Take a look around, kid. What do you see? Homes being foreclosed, people working 2-3 jobs just to put food on the table and still drowning in debt. Don't get me wrong. This country was founded on great ideals and principles. They've all been ruined by the banks. Open your eyes to the banks that are robbing you. You know who my favorite president was? Who? Thomas Jefferson. Because he saw all of this coming and tried to stop it. He fought the banks. JFK too, and they killed him for it. The banking institution is more dangerous than an army, he said. He also said that every generation needs a revolution, Jimmy. The American dream is just that. Just a dream. War is a continuation of politics, only by other means. Politics is a continuation of economics by other means. This is our bank. This is our war. And this is our plan of attack.
Banks have become an essential threat to our democracy. So consider this justice.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio!
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution